Good morning, everybody. My name is John Corlett. I'm the chairman of the Legislative Committee for AAA New York State. AAA New York State has 2.8 million members residing in the state. We're happy to have Congressman Anthony Delgado from New York's 19th Congressional District, which I happen to know very well, Congressman. I do a lot of hiking up in the Catskills, Rhinebeck, very beautiful area. The Congressman is also a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, and anyone following the news surely knows that these issues have been central in Washington in the last few days and actually as we speak. So good morning, Congressman. Thank you for joining us this morning. I guess to start out, could we just get the general state of play with respect to the Biden administration's $1.2 trillion infrastructure package and the Build Better back plan? You know, obviously this seems to be changing by the day down in Washington.
Yes, well, first of all, John, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity. Sorry for the delay here. I believe we had some technical difficulties. But let me just start by saying, as someone who represents the 8th most rural congressional district in the country, where we have roads and bridges in disrepair, and in some counties, upwards of 80% of the roads are in disrepair. We have communities going without broadband access in the 21st century and reliable cell service, which is not just an economic issue, but a public safety issue for so many of our families. We have water piping in certain parts of our district that are still made out of wood in the 21st century. So when it comes to understanding where things are and what we need, there's no doubt in my mind that making sure that we get the bipartisan infrastructure deal done and signed into law is critically important. There's a lot of money in that bipartisan bill that goes towards roads, that goes towards bridges, that goes towards broadband, that goes towards water infrastructure, all of which I'm a big proponent of. So I know there's been a lot of back and forth right now on the issue. My focus has been to continue to push ahead, make sure we get people real relief and see effective government. And we have a chance to show that if we can get over the finish line here.
I hate to put you on the spot here, but do you have any expectations as with respect to a timeline of when this?
My expectations have been blown up multiple times. So asking me what my expectations are, I'm not sure how reliable of a source I actually am. You know, I think that the challenge here is that a number of these issues are being worked out amongst a small group of individuals, if you will. And so as a result of that, my visibility into the exact timing of all this is a bit strained, which, as you might imagine, is frustrating. You know, I understand the needs of these communities that I represent, and I understand that we have to step up and get something done sooner than later.
With respect to the funding options, do you have any thoughts? There's been various proposals on alternatives to the gas tax, which hasn't been raised since 1993, I believe. Do you have any thoughts on alternative funding, such as the VMT?
Well, I know that there's some conversations right now being floated around with the VMT and potentially, you know, doing a pilot program. You know, I believe actually the bipartisan infrastructure bill includes a voluntary VMT pilot program to test the model nationwide as more and more electric vehicles are going to be utilized. And a lot of the stuff that is being talked about right now in the larger package has to do with incentivizing investment in that space. We're seeing major, you know, car manufacturers like GM who have made it clear they want to move away from combustion engines by 2035. And so the trend lines are clear. And so it's important that, you know, that we are accounting for these trend lines and that the electric vehicles are holding up their part of the bargain in terms of the wear and tear on our roads.
Just to get back to some of the points you made about broadband. You mentioned broadband being a safety issue, and given the fact that much of your district is in rural areas, are you referring to the ability of people to call, say, you know, if they're stranded on the roadside, or?
Yes, I'm referring to people who
right.
Here's an even better example because it's very timely. You know, we're seeing hurricanes, you're seeing extreme weather events that are causing power outages. In some cases, or situations where people have to basically get access to the emergency services, which, by the way, are already problematic when you're talking about access points because of rural communities. So being in a position where more and more people are dealing with flooding and their lives are at risk as a result, and there needs to be an opportunity to be able to reach out and connect with the emergency first responders, and they simply can't because they don't have the infrastructure in place to do so, is very much a public safety hazard, very much so. And so before we even get to the fact that we have students who need broadband to compete and to learn in today's environment, we have seniors who need broadband for telemedicine. We have businesses, small businesses, our local farmers who need broadband as well to engage in the marketplace. So all these things are critically important, but the primary focus should be on making sure nobody loses their life because they didn't have broadband access in America in the 21st century.
Okay, thank you. I got another question here for you. We hear more and more talk about the need to inject equity into issues involving transportation, mobility, transportation financing. Do you have any thoughts on this? And is there anything included in the $1.2 trillion package that would address these issues?
Well, I know that when we voted to pass the Invest in America Act, it authorized, I think, 30% of all public transportation expenditures go to underserved urban areas and rural communities with persistent poverty. So there is some language in the Invest in America Act. The bill would also provide $2 million in funding for federal state partnerships that would develop comprehensive policies for more affordable and accessible transportation going forward. So I think there's been an attempt by us on the T&I committee to move these policies forward and to address those inequities that you've raised.
Okay, thank you. On to the next question here. With respect to EVs, you just mentioned EVs. They now account for 2.5% of purchases, but sales in the first 6 months of this year are up 160% versus 2020. Do you have any thoughts on the impact EVs will have on the average driver or your constituents?
Well, I mean, I think it all goes back to the point that I raised before about the trend lines here. As we continue to figure out ways to deal with climate change, and I think the electric vehicles and investment in those vehicles is certainly a critical step. And we're seeing, like I said, major car manufacturers already committing to that. And I think they're doing so, for a number of reasons, but one can't deny the fact that they're doing it in part because they see, from an economic standpoint, it's beneficial, right? Because that's where the demand is coming from. As demand grows, you want to be able to tap into that demand as a company. And so the question then becomes, how do we modernize the ways in which we fund the repair of our roads, the upkeep of our roads and our infrastructure? If the trend lines are moving in a direction that is reflective of advancing technology and a policy designed to confront climate change, and yet the manner in which we continue to raise funds isn't consistent with that, we need to address those realities and make sure that we are balancing out the equation to better put ourselves in a position to sustain ourselves for the future.
Okay, thank you. Do you have specific projects in your district that you would like to see funded in the package? I know you mentioned broadband.
I'm sorry.
Are there specific projects, road projects or bridge projects in your district that you would like to see funded?
Well, there's the projects that I like to see funded are a myriad of investments in our infrastructure, in our roads, in our bridges, investment in broadband. Like I said, we have towns in our counties that are having issues with water piping, wastewater management issues. There's so much that can be done, particularly in our rural communities, to address outdated, outmoded infrastructure, both above ground and beneath ground. And so the sooner we can get something done to get these investments to help our communities is critically important. Back when we got the rescue plan through, a big focus of mine was making sure that we get direct funding to our towns, to our villages, to our counties. A lot of the funding back when the CARES Act was passed was a threshold for the population being 500,000 people or more. In my rural district, we don't have any municipality, any county that size. And so I fought to make sure we secure direct funding to our municipalities, to our townships, to our villages of any size. And they can use those funds to invest in infrastructure. And so I've already been thinking about ways in which we can support our communities at the local level to ensure that those folks on the ground who best know how to utilize these funds are empowered to do so.
Okay, thank you for that. Just a question about the politics in Washington. Is it really as bad as you see on the news as far as the partisan infighting, or do you have a take on that? On the partisanship?
I think it's very partisan. I think it's dysfunctional. I think our system right now is rewarding extremism, and there's an absence of, and there's an inability right now for us to be working in a way that is focused on finding common ground. That's been my focus. You know, more than half of the bills that I introduce are bipartisan, led with a Republican. You know, I have bills that are grounded in the needs of my constituency. I find individuals across the political spectrum that I serve with who share these concerns with me, and we lead these projects, these bills together to demonstrate that we can come together, whether it's on PFAS, whether it's on broadband, whether it's helping our farmers, our small business owners. The work has to be done in a very intentional way, because there are so many other temptations beyond that work that create financial incentives, if you will, or attention, just attention, that really doesn't warrant, that doesn't speak to the point of what we're doing, which is to serve the community, which is to serve the public. And so, yes, I find myself quite frustrated by the divisiveness and the dysfunction and the partisanship. I'm proud to have been, you know, the Chamber of Commerce endorsed me as one of the more bipartisan members of Congress, somebody who's solutions oriented. You know, this is something that I take a lot of pride in. We need a lot more of our leaders to step up and put people before party.
Okay, thank you. Earlier this year, the Colonial Pipeline was shut down. That had a severe impact on gas prices for a time being there. Do you have any thoughts on how to better secure and prevent these ransomware attacks on our infrastructure?
I think the event clearly revealed a serious issue in our ability to protect our nation's energy infrastructure. You know, we actually voted to pass HR 1374, the Enhancing State Energy Security Planning and Emergency Preparedness Act, which I think would speak to some of the challenges that were revealed by virtue of that hack. I think providing funds to states to bolster and modernize their infrastructure security is critical in preventing another Colonial Pipeline disaster. So I think it's a wake-up call, and hopefully we can take steps here in Congress to get out in front of it.
Okay, thank you. I know we only had 15 minutes scheduled. I don't know if I'll just open it up to you if you have any thoughts on what's happening in DC you want to share with people, or in your district, or we did send the invitation out to many of your constituents who are watching this.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, I appreciate the time, and to my constituents, you know, I'm going to continue to work, you know, for you and do everything I can to represent you to the best of my abilities, and do so in a way, like I said, that is solutions oriented, not partisan driven. We have a lot of work ahead of us. We are still dealing with the pandemic. We've made some progress in that vein, but the fact remains, you know, it's been a very hard year and a half for our country, and it's time that we come together and figure out how to be more solutions oriented here in Washington, with the understanding that, you know, you're not going to get everything you want, but the key here is to make progress. The key here is to make progress and to demonstrate that a government can work for the people. It can be effective, it can be thoughtful, it can be responsible, it can be caring, and not wasteful. And I think that's the type of mindset that I try to bring to the table every day.
Okay, thank you. With that, I think we'll wrap it up. I'd just like to say thank you again, Congressman, for joining us. I know you probably have a very hectic schedule down there with everything that's happening. I'd also like to thank Robert Doherty and Christine on your staff for working with us, as well as Mark Shieldrop on our end for doing the technical support, and Shawnee Jarvis on our end for doing the graphic design. So thank you, everybody, for joining us, and be safe and have a great day.
Thank you.